Good morning. Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 22nd World Economic Forum on Africa. This session marks the start of the Addis chapter of our story in Africa. In Swahili tradition, before the storyteller begins, they make sure that the audience is prepared to receive the story. So when I say kitendawili, I would like you to respond by saying tega. Kitendawili.
Tega.
Kitendawili.
Tega.
I was born into an integrated East African community that had the East Africa Shilling, the East Africa Railways, and the East Africa Airways. This first attempt at integration collapsed in 1977. In 1979, Tanzanian troops overthrew Uganda dictator Idi Amin. I remember being glued to a TV screen in Nairobi as a coup d'etat attempt unfolded in 1982. Then in 2000, the East Africa community was officially revived, and the sub-region saw a dramatic rise in economic growth and opportunities over the past decade. Africa's integration is an important agenda, and the World Economic Forum on Africa is a platform that brings together Africans and the global community with an interest in the region. I am therefore pleased to announce this year we have over 700 participants from over 70 countries around the world, representing every region in the world. The majority of the participants are coming from sub-Saharan Africa and from more than 30 countries. Over 500 participants are from the business community and 20% are women. This is an increase and it will go higher. Over 90 public officials, including 7 heads of state or government from Ethiopia, Djibouti, Gabon, Namibia, Nigeria, Rwanda, and Tanzania. We also have the Vice Prime Minister of Mauritius and the Deputy Prime Minister of Zimbabwe in attendance. We also have over 70 young leaders from our Young Global Leader and Global Shapers communities. In addition, this year we launched a social media campaign to link the forum and the public at large. It is called 1 Year, 1 Change, and we have asked African citizens to share with our participants the change that they wish to see in the year ahead. We kindly invite you to respond to their requests at the social media corner. Ladies and gentlemen, without further delay, I would like to welcome Professor Klaus Schwab, Executive Chairman and Founder of the World Economic Forum, to give his opening remarks.
Thank you, Elsie. Distinguished heads of state, governments, excellencies, friends, members of the World Economic Forum. First, I would like to thank you, Prime Minister Meles, for the great hospitality with which we are received here in your country. We had the pleasure to cooperate with your people, and I can tell everybody we established an excellent partnership. This is our 22nd meeting on Africa. And if I go back over the last 2 decades, I can see quite some different atmospheres, attitudes, which characterized our summits, our World Economic Forums on Africa. I would say at the beginning, there was substantial cynicism, later replaced by skepticism. And then we moved to realism. And now we are here, and I think the atmosphere which we already experienced during the last hours is one of pragmatic optimism. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a multi-stakeholder meeting. I think this is something very special about the World Economic Forum, because we believe it's not business alone or governments alone or civil society alone which can address the issues which can work together to make opportunities a reality. So I welcome the young global leaders among ourselves here in the hall. I welcome the global shapers, but I welcome particularly also the many participants from civil society, social entrepreneurs, and so on. But this meeting is not only bringing together the multi-stakeholders, it's a combination of addressing the issues by dialogue, but at the same time providing a platform for concrete action. And we are very proud that during this meeting we can catalyze and advance a number of concrete projects to shape the transformation process of Africa. And now I have the great pleasure to invite my colleague, Joseph Xiqing, Vice Chairman and member of the Managing Board of the World Economic Forum and former Managing Director of the World Food Programme. And I can tell you, I'm pleased. We always had a great passion for Africa, but with your presence, the passion has been multiplied, multifold. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Professor Schwab, Mr. Prime Minister, Excellencies. There's certain moments in time where you realize the world has shifted. And for me, being in Addis today, here, is one of those moments in time. Indeed, I was here almost 5 years ago to the day. As the new head of the World Food Program, we had a bold idea that was really under the direction of Africa's leaders themselves, which was to change the mentality of a handout to a hand up. And you know the story today. The World Food Program buys 80% of its food it purchases from developing world farmers. And that shift, I think, has taken place more broadly in the world, from handout the era to hand up. But I realized here now that even those words hand up sound outdated. And really what we're meeting is in the era of the handshake. This is an era of partnership, as Professor Schwab said, built on mutuality of interest, built on respect, built on the ability of all partners to come together to follow Africa's lead in its own transformation. And so today I feel that. I feel that because of the visionary leadership gathered here in the multi-stakeholder platform that Professor Schwab envisioned in working with the leaders of Africa 22 years ago. And I feel it because of the different sectors that are brought here. I also am thinking today of Brazil 1974, a different era, a different food crisis in the world, but a time when the world realized that to feed itself, it had to reach out and develop and deal with and talk with farmers that the world really had left behind. Well, today we know the era of the African farmer has come. The world cannot feed itself without the African farmer. And today you feel the energy of potential and opportunity that perhaps we would have felt in 1974 in Brazil after that food crisis. And we know the story that Brazil today is defeating hunger faster than any nation on earth and one of the top 5 ag exporters in the world. I think we're at that tipping point. I think it won't take 3 decades. I think when we meet 10 years from now, it will be in an Africa that's not only feeding itself, but feeding the world. So my only thought today is I hope we all come here with new eyes for each other, that we look at each other freshly. The world to Africa, Africa to the world, Africa to itself, to the farmers and others here in the room, that we understand that they hold the potential of hope, and that problems are not problems, they're opportunities. And today, that we don't wait for a new generation or till next week, today, here, at this forum, we begin to solve the problems in a real way that's trustful, respectful, and creates opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Josette. Thank you, Professor Schwab, and also my colleague, Elsie. We are gathered here at the backdrop of a situation where Africa is the fastest growing continent in the world, but also the youngest continent. More than 60% of the population in Africa is under 30 years old. The coming decade, there has to be created more than 100 million jobs for these young people. The last decade has been economically a decade where Africa has had substantial growth. In 8 of the past 10 years, Africa's lion economies have grown faster than East Asia's tigers. So far, also, Africa has weathered the financial crisis and the economic crisis better than other continents. And the latest numbers are also showing quite good prospects for the coming decade, where international organizations are saying that out of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world, 7 of them will be in Africa. Africa is on the brink of a major transformation, and this is taking place against the backdrop of a new world order. And I'm so privileged and pleased with having such a distinguished panel with our co-chairs to discuss the opportunities, but also the challenges for Africa in this new world order. To my left here, we have Donald Kaberuka. We all know him, President, African Development Bank, former finance minister in Rwanda, and also, not at least, a member of the Global Issue Group at the World Economic Forum. His Excellency, Mr. Kofi Annan, doesn't really need a presentation. We all know him. He is Mr. Africa and also the chairman of Africa Progress Panel, and not at least, a member of the foundation board of the World Economic Forum. Then we have Monhla, Chairperson, Industrial Development Corporation of South Africa. We also have Xiqing, President and Vice Chairman of China Investment Corporation. We have Doug McMillan, President and Chief Executive Officer of Walmart. And not at least, we have my friend Bekele Geleta, the Secretary General of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent. It's a great panel. Welcome. Let me start with you, Mr. Kaberuka. Listening to the economic outlook for Africa, what are the priorities for the continent to continue on the positive track record that we have seen the last 10 years?
Thank you. Thank you. Let me say good morning to the leaders who are here and friends who are in this room. It is true, Africa has had an excellent decade, the best in 50 years. We have shown resilience. There are some pockets of resistance. There are issues. There are some setbacks. But on balance, whether it is economic growth or poverty reduction, things are happening. However, I must add 2 things of caution. We should not confuse economic growth with economic transformation. The structure of Africa's economies are not changing fast enough. We are still very much commodity dependent and therefore very much vulnerable to the external shocks in the global economy. Now, nothing is preordained. This momentum can be kept or can be frittered away. I see 4 issues to ensure that we keep the momentum. Number 1, we have to manage external shocks. When the financial crisis hit in 2008, many of the economies in Africa had a lot of space for counter-cyclical policies to withstand the shocks in the global economy. Those buffers are now much weaker than they were in 2008. Those buffers have to be rebuilt. That is item one. Item two, it is the whole issue of managing natural resources. Almost now 40 countries in Africa have identified either oil, gas, or some other mineral wealth. Now, that does not have to become a curse, but it has to be managed. The models for managing natural wealth, to turn them into real wealth, are known. To use Marco Porter's famous dictum, how do you go from inherited wealth to actually created wealth? That is critical. The third issue, I think, will be fixing the infrastructure gap. There's no argument here. I'm coming from a country yesterday where the capital city is now about 1 million people, and the water systems can only cope with 17,000 subscribers. 17,000. Those kind of issues have to be fixed. Now, finally, there's an excellent article in some of the documents here for this forum done by Justin Lin, former chief economist of the World Bank. I recommend that article to you. Basically what it says, giving the example of Ethiopia, is that we have to begin now to think about how to take advantage of the change in what they call the Asian price. The real wage in China is increasing. It will be increasing. And therefore, investors in Asia will be looking for a new land of opportunity. That new land of opportunity has to be Africa. But there are some things you have to do for that to happen. They give the example of Ethiopia and shoe manufacturing and a few other things. And I think that is the way to go to economic transformation. To go from economic growth to economic transformation. I'm sure we can discuss this later in the day. Finally, this has been mentioned by many people. It is to ensure that this economic growth is broad-based. You cannot remove inequalities completely, but at every juncture, we have to ensure that the policy mix is that which ensures that the benefits of economic growth benefit the majority of the population.
Thank you. Mr. Annan, what priorities must Africa address today in order to transform tomorrow?
Let me start with the issue of governance and leadership. I think we've made considerable progress on the continent. We've held some exemplary elections. I think Senegal gave us a very good demonstration of that. We've also had some setbacks where we've seen coup d'etats re-emerging in Mali and Equatorial Guinea. But I think what is important is to create space also for civil society in Africa to play a role. They have an important role to play, and they can maintain the pressure on elected officials to deliver. We also need to address the issue of inequality, which Donald also referred to. We cannot talk of growth when millions of people are left behind or are marginalized. So the policies have to be such that it has impact on all population, and that we also offer equal access to opportunities for our population. The other area we need to focus on is the youth, how we harness their energy, how we educate them, make sure they are healthy and will be able to be productive citizens. And how do we go about creating the jobs that they will need? Donald has given some indications, and I think agriculture is also an important area where we can create serious employment for people and perhaps eventually even slow the drift into the cities so that people can discover that they can have a very decent living in the rural areas. And we need to really bear in mind the interest of the smallholder farmers. Because when we think of agricultural transformation, we tend to focus on large-scale farms. Commercial farms are also necessary. It's not either or, and large-scale farms handled properly can be beneficial to the small-scale farmers. So we can produce enough to feed ourselves, export, and also create jobs. I think on the question of governance and leadership, we have lessons to learn from North Africa and the Middle East, where frustrated citizenship who wanted to have a say in how they are governed and whom they are governed by, and to have a say as to the future direction of their countries rose up. And I think when you look at the situation and you look at the indexes, quite a few of these countries, take Tunisia for example, was doing extremely well on issue of stability, economic development. But the third pillar, rule of law and respect for human rights, they are the areas where sometimes these countries faltered. And it is those areas that propel the people to take to the streets and demand action. So we should pay attention to that. And of course, what I won't go through, we've talked about infrastructure, energy, and improving intra-African trade. I think I've had my 2 minutes and I'll stop here. The only other thing I wanted to say, be careful. The moderator started by saying Kofi Annan doesn't need any introduction. Don't believe that, because when I stepped down as Secretary General, my wife and I went on a holiday, and we took a house of a friend adjacent to a forest, so that we could go and walk in the forest without going through the village for anybody to know we were there. And we were going to do this for 3 months or so. After 6 weeks, I was quite bored, because we had no television, no newspaper, no radio, and I said, let me go and get a newspaper. We had barely entered a tobacconist shop when a group of 5 men standing at the corner kept staring at us. One of them broke away and made for us, and I said to my wife, we have 6 weeks to go and we've blown our cover. How are we going to survive in the village? By then the fellow was on top of me, and he put his hand out and said, Morgan Freeman. Yeah. May I have an autograph? So I said, sure. And I signed K. Freeman. He was happy, I was happy. And we continued our holidays anonymously. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing that beautiful history with us, Mr. Annan. But just a short follow-up question. We've seen a growth and positive development in Africa the last decade. Where do you see Africa in 10 years? Mr. Annan, yes.
I think in terms of governance, the progress that we are seeing, I expect to continue. I'm also encouraged that we are seeing the beginnings of a reverse brain drain, where Africans who've been trained in Europe and America, who've worked there, are coming back. They see the opportunities, the potential, and they are coming back to make a contribution. And I think if we also focus on education and health and prepare our youth for the future, we will have this demographic bonus where you have young, dynamic society that will be playing its role. But to do that, we also need to think seriously about generational change. We need to engage the young people. We need to bring them into politics, into decision making, and prepare them for the future. If we do that and do what Donald was saying, try and ensure that you invest the resources that the revenues we are getting from our natural resources and diversify the economies, Africa should be a wonderful place to be in 10 years' time for our young people. But we need to empower them. We need to encourage them to play the role that they must.
Thank you. Mrs. Hlahla, as a successful businesswoman from South Africa, You also seen the changes taking place the last 10 years. And listening to what Mr. Annan is also now saying, what will it take to continue on this positive track when it comes to growth and also increased opportunities for the young people?
Thank you very much for that. I think for me, firstly, it's about time we put the African in the center. I think the more we accept that we come in all shapes and sizes, we've got contradictions of poverty, we've got contradictions of success, we've got great entrepreneurs and poor ones, and that they all need to participate in this upside and upswing, the best way we can start. So the first thing for me as an advantage would be the change of attitude, so that the African farmer can also as much bring the coffee beans, but can also enjoy the coffee, that they can actually taste what it is that they are producing for. There's an element where we must bring the African in so that they can not only get employed, but they can participate in this growth. Secondly, governments in terms of leadership have got to be more decisive and deliberate about infrastructure. An infrastructure that will, again, bring in the African into the center, but secondly, ensure that first, intra-regional trade becomes a priority, because all of our infrastructure today is about exporting externally raw materials. The African of today would like to ensure that we move from private production to the much more sophisticated, more productive sectors. Therefore, infrastructure must promote intra-African trade and therefore international trade. Thirdly and lastly, I think leadership that is decisive, predictable, deliberate, consistent is what all of us require, so that we can begin to do small and big things. It is okay to talk about the Inga Dam and to talk about the big things that we can do, but often than not, when there are challenges that come from citizenry, governments would change from, okay, today I want a toll road, tomorrow I don't. I want an airport, tomorrow I don't, depending on where challenges are coming from the citizenry. Fundamentally, the African success is about each African. If we understood who they are, men, women, entrepreneurs, youth, and leverage them in this growth, deliberately build infrastructure, and ensure that we deliver big and small at the same time, we can be able to enable sustainability and growth into the future.
And you're optimistic?
Very optimistic as an African.
Also for South Africa?
For the whole continent, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Gao, China is now the largest trading partner of Africa. And I heard you this morning say that when you're traveling around in Africa now, it reminds you of China 20 to 30 years ago. Could you elaborate?
Yeah, that to me is a very exciting prospect. And in the past few days when I was driving around in the city, seeing the stark contrast of these big buildings with unpaved roads with potholes and water splashing everywhere. And some people were complaining. I said, no, this is exactly the same as what we were having just 20, 30 years ago. Even 10 years ago, in many of the inland cities where I travel extensively, you see things like that in large cities and small. Today, most cities, I wouldn't say all, most cities in China are all have paved roads and have big buildings and all that. Not necessarily a good thing. That is my possible advice to my African friends. Because when we talk about it, when they say, oh, we need to learn from China of all these things, I said, look, we are learning from Africa, from many of my African friends, that development is not necessarily just growth. And I've been to many African countries, and I was struck over the past 10 years by the kind of a sensible policies in many countries in Africa where you would not allow just sheer economic growth in spite of everything else. And today we are paying a price for pollution, for going at a neck-breaking speed all the time, and for not paying enough attention to the distribution of not only wealth but also opportunities, and for the lack of enough attention to environmental issues, ecosystem. Therefore, I think we have a lot to learn from each other, and there are, of course, things that my African friends can also learn from China in the way we make plans and we execute plans. That sometimes is a great thing because if you say you want to build something, you build it within a time frame. The problem is that if your plan is to build in spite of other considerations, then you start having to suffer consequences after that. So for me, I'm very, very excited because like what our great leader Chairman Mao used to say, that was in 1949, 1950, right after the Chinese Revolution. He said, we are in a great stage because we are one clean sheet of paper. We can write all the beautiful pictures on it. And I beg you, please, my friends here, try to write a beautiful picture on your clean sheet of paper, not to smash it with just economic growth. Thank you.
Amazing. So one clean sheet of paper. I saw you, Mr. Gao, was writing an op-ed raising some of the issues that are important for Africa. You raised some of them and also very candid way raised some of the concerns that you should be aware when it comes to decoupling growth from environmental distractions and etc. This white paper, you said that one needs an investor-friendly, healthy and stable business environment in Africa. Where do we stand there?
Well, I said that from the sitting in my shoes of being the president of China Investment Corporation, we have to invest in the various countries, and we do have a return target for the investment, and therefore very often we'll evaluate the prospective projects based on risks. And these risks are, to be frank, established by our Western friends in their age-old way of doing things. That's what I would call rules dependency. And that in that particular country where they would think, well, why don't you invest in our country, namely a Western developed country? I said, well, we think there's great opportunities. I said, what about the instability there, the corruption there? And I would say, well, we all have these issues to tackle with in every country in the world, not just the few countries you're talking about. But in the end of the day, when I was talking about it from a much more macro and philosophical point of view. But as an investor and as a country in Africa where you want to compete for foreign investment, because there's always limited resources, and then you have no way out but to look at all these what we would call the Western standards, and to at least establish some sort of predictability, so that people say, okay, at least for this period of time, I would like to invest in your country because it's more stable, and because it has transparency, and because we can get what we expect to get.
Thank you. We'll turn to Mr. Macmillan, the CEO of Walmart, the largest retailer in the world. China is the biggest trading partner of Africa, but still the US and Europe separately are investing more when it comes to FDI in Africa. Your company, Walmart, has just invested $2.4 billion in a large South African retailer that also has operations in 12 African countries. And you were saying, as a comment to that our investment in Massmont is really an investment in Africa. Where do you see Walmart in Africa in 10 years? And can you elaborate on that?
Well, I don't know that I can see that far ahead, but I'll do my best to describe the situation. We started looking at this region of the world a few years ago and obviously saw the numbers and got excited about the growth and the potential of this region of the world. And then we started visiting and meeting people who conveyed this optimism and heard about the plans that were being laid to capture this opportunity that exists here and got very excited about it, thus the size of the investment. As we look at the region, we think of it through the lens of customers, of consumers, of families that shop, and think about what it is that they want today and what they're going to need in the future. And we start out by thinking about food. Around the world, Walmart sells a lot of food, and if you think about fruits and vegetables, for example, as we've grown outside the United States, which has started about 20 years ago, our growth outside the U.S., we've amended our plans from a sourcing point of view to be able to work with small farmers, and we work with large numbers of small farmers around the world. We get benefits for our customers by being able to give them fresh, quality, safe fruits and vegetables because those goods are grown locally. It helps create higher income levels. The farmers make more money, and we partner together with them directly to get those goods to our stores and to our customers. And so an important part of what we think about in this region looking forward is food. And today, the investment that we've made in MassMart has us in a situation where they have an experience and capabilities that are well developed in non-food, but an emerging set of capabilities in food in South Africa and in the other markets that you mentioned and throughout the region. So we'll be partnering with them to help create a situation where African solutions are brought to local markets, but with some knowledge that we've developed from around the world about how to work with small farmers, how to create a situation where they have a pack house, a training center, where cold chain starts to exist, where markets are available to them so they have transparent pricing and they understand business, agribusiness, in a way that they might not have before. And later today, I'm planning to see the commodity exchange, and I congratulate you, Mr. Prime Minister, on your leadership and what you and Eleni and the team have created here. I believe that's a model that may make sense in other markets and an example of the kind of infrastructure that we would like to see to help take full advantage of the food opportunity that exists. I also believe this evolution involves non-food. And buying locally for non-food helps us in many ways, reducing lead times, creating more relevant product. So it's in our best interest to buy locally. And what we plan to do over time is to help evolve that business by partnering with people around the region to be able to do that. Logistics is a key component. There are infrastructure needs as it relates to logistics. We understand those. It's our expectation that policy, rules, transparency are going to continue to improve so that investments can be evaluated appropriately. And then maybe most importantly, people. We need great people. Our best store managers, our best leaders frequently start out as a cashier or someone working in the back room of a store. So education is important. The empowerment of women is important. And what we see is encouraging. And what we want to do is play a role. As I mentioned, Walmart does not know much about this region of the world. MassMart has some knowledge. And so we come to the continent with both ears wide open and a collaborative attitude that we hope will create a situation where we can play a small part in this region of the world capturing the opportunity that exists here.
Mr. Macmillan, I guess also the fact that there are no more than 300 million people in the middle class in Africa has been an important entry point for your investment. And it's amazing, you know, more than 34% of Africa's population is no middle class, huh?
No doubt. Tremendous upside there. And as people emerge into the middle class, as we've seen from around the world, their purchasing habits change, and we have a chance to influence how supply chains work, create more efficiency, create more sustainable supply chains so that the middle class can continue to grow. That's why we're here, because we believe that's happening.
Secretary General Mr. Geleta from the Red Cross and Red Crescent. You are represented in all the corners of Africa. You have millions of volunteers in this continent. And being an African and Ethiopian yourself, you've probably seen a lot of changes taking place the last 10 years, and also this emerging middle class. But how can we make sure that this growth also trickles down to the poor people of Africa? Could you share some views on that?
Well, let me first take the opportunity to thank Professor Klaus for the opportunity to co-chair this forum with so much distinguished individuals here. I'm very pleased to co-chair here in the country of my birth. Let me take this opportunity to congratulate the leadership and the people of Ethiopia for doing so much.
Closer to the mic,
time.
please.
Let me take this opportunity to congratulate the leadership and the people of Ethiopia for doing so much in such a short time. I'm very, very pleased about that. Let me come back to your question, Borge. Now, distribution of wealth creation is very difficult, and it takes time. There is no question about it. And it requires joint effort from everybody. Governments will have to continue investing in macroeconomy, meaning the infrastructure will have to continue growing, health will have to be expanded, education, skills development. Governments will have to continue doing this. Businesses will have to continue creating wealth. It's extremely important. Now, by doing so, the small farmer, the small business will have to be motivated. The younger generation will have to be encouraged to become as creative as possible. Now, essentially, this means about people. People will have to see light through the tunnel. They must feel that they belong. They must feel that they participate. They must feel that they own the growth. It's extremely important. They must also feel that there is free and fair opportunity for everybody. This is extremely important also. Now, in addition, there would be hazards in Africa. There are known disasters in Africa, drought and floods in particular. Now, people must feel that they are looked after, that they are taken care of, that they are supported to be able to win back their life, meaning not dishing out, not hand out support, no. Help them to be self-sufficient themselves. Now, this again is extremely important. So, exposure to what is happening around the world. To say, for example, we are entering into the digital revolution. The younger generation in Africa should feel that they have an opportunity to join this revolution. Now, this can be supported by the humanitarian development world, by the civil society. Now, civil society can help people to help themselves. Civil society has connectivity around the globe. It can mobilize global support, but for this, governments will have to have proper regulations in the first place to put in place strong civil society, strong humanitarian development organizations within their countries, so that they would be able to partner with externals and with internal business partners as well. So it takes time, trickling down, as you say. It is not trickling down, actually, sharing the benefits of the wealth. It takes time. It is doable because the rest of the world is doing it, has done it. It can be done in Africa. What is important is that what has been started in Africa today, what has been achieved in the last one decade and a half, actually half a decade, probably, the real change, this pace will have to be continued.
Thank you. Mr. Gao, China, we've seen hundreds of millions of people being lifted out of poverty. At the same time, you said that we're looking at Africa as a blank sheet, or you used Mr. Mao's expression there. Is there any lesson that Africa can learn growing quite fast now, but making sure that the growth is also inclusive?
Well, I fully understand that we have different cultural heritages and different history, but we do share many common traits. Like China was not very long ago under what we would call semi-colonial society, and we were exploited by Western forces as well as our own rich classes, and that was the reason for the 1949 revolution. And over the past 60, 70 years, the government has done a great deal to try to make the society more equitable, more fair, and to make it, just as our friend just mentioned, make the younger people to feel that that's a society which they own. which they belong to, and where they are being treated fairly and equally and justly. But with the past 30 years of development, where we made great strides in economic growth, we sometimes, in various pockets of life, have ignored or by and large doing things despite of those concerns. Therefore, we started running into certain problems. As you can see, today's Gini coefficient in China, the difference between the rich and the poor in China, has grown tremendously more than, say, 30 years ago. The government has been paying a lot of attention to it, and the government is very aware of it and trying to do things to address it. But you have to remember, if you have a large population like China, and Africa as a whole has a huge population as well, so if you don't deal with these things from early on, then gradually it will become a little too difficult to address the issue. So I think for us, we are learning from our mistakes, and we're trying to do things. It's not too late, but wouldn't it be much better if you just start out the right way? And we see a lot of African countries that's starting to evolve into that realm. And I see very encouraging signs where the government start to do education first. That I think is tremendously more important. I was in a educational roundtable with Prime Minister Meles, and I was very, very impressed by the way Prime Minister sees the problems in his country and how to deal with it. Because I was foolish enough to offer our own experience, and Prime Minister said, well, we will try to solve that problem, but in our country, we have a different set of issues. So in that, I believe that by spotting the issues, by identifying the problems, then you can start to address it, and eventually, in the long run, we'll be all in a much better society. We have to realize that this is a much more crowded society. It's a much more crowded globe, and if we can't forget about the sort of competition among all the countries, but at a time when we're addressing competition issues, we have to try to work together. This is why this is so exciting to have this forum, where all the countries get together and try to address issues that's of a common nature, rather than dealing with the only problem with your own country. Because China is large enough at the time to think inwardly and think only about ourselves. But now we come to a point where we have to deal with the global village. So we can't really be oblivion of what's happening around us. That's how I see this.
Thank you. Mr. Kaberuka, is the growth trickling down to the poor people of Africa? Where do Africa stand on inequalities, and what policies should Africa implement, seen from the African Investment Bank, and what kind of projects are you supporting in that sense?
Thank you very much. But could I first of all recommend our Chinese friend for what he said about China, because people forget that China has reached a point where it is by learning from its own lessons. They never copied anyone. People forget that in China in 1958, almost 40 million people died from famine during a period they call the Great Leap Forward. They learned their lessons and they moved on. And I think what is important in this current phase of Africa's growth is that we should learn as we move. There are no lessons anywhere which are perfect. We have to look at things which work for ourselves and learn as we move on. There's no model there. Now, that applies also to this issue of inclusive growth and inequalities. It is true that Africa is the second most unequal continent after Latin America. But there is a reason for that. If you look at the numbers closely, the most important reason is that the numbers are being driven by natural resources. If a country is dependent on oil, on gas, on the mining industry, public policy choices have to deliberately target ways of ensuring that that particular wealth trickles down to other sectors of the economy. What has happened in the past is that the opposite has happened. And then you have what they call the Dutch disease and so on. So for the natural resource-rich countries, it is about public policy and policy choices. For the other countries, it's not very easy, but I think there are two main drivers which can be addressed. One is ensuring that children of the poor go to school and receive quality education. But the biggest multiplier of inequalities is when children of the poor actually inherit the living standards of their own fathers. It is important to get children of the poor in school, they get quality education, and that almost in a generation can do things. Number two, in all these countries, you see where the Gini coefficients are quite reasonable. It's about small, medium enterprises, not the large companies. So I think what we try to advise the countries is address education, especially children of the poor, address SMEs, and of course address agriculture.
Mr. Annan, ensuring children of the poor goes to school, SMEs, and also investment in agriculture. I guess this is something that you agree.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with what Donald has said. The only other thing I would want to put on the table, and I'm happy to see there are several heads of states here in government, and I'm sure they would agree. We have, he referred to public policy. It's an issue which is a real problem for us. There's hardly any public policy debate in our countries. We do not debate the direction of the country, where we are going, and why we are going in that direction, come to a consensus that we all agree this is where we want to go, so that regardless of who wins elections and who is in office, we follow that direction. What we have tended to see on our continent is with each change of government, we start afresh. The new government comes in and wants to sweep away the things that the previous government did. And in a way, you are starting afresh simply because we do not have that consensus on the vision. And I hope we can encourage public forum debates, public policy debates in our countries, working with civil society, with the universities, even if it's once a year, to really discuss where are we going and get a consensus so that we can continue to build on achievements of each government and not begin from afresh when a new man or woman comes in.
So, do you think, Mr. Yeah, please give applause. How important, Mr. Annan, do you think the new emerging middle class of Africa will be? There are more than 300 million already. Will this have also a lot of impact on governance, rule of law, school?
It could if they are active and not entirely selfish. Let me explain what I mean by that. If they can be active by participating in improving their society. Often people come to you and say, what can be done? There is a problem. How do we tackle it? They sometimes feel it's up to the government, but it starts in their own communities. They can do a lot within their communities, particularly the middle class who have some means and are educated. So they can either come together in civil society organizations as NGOs to help resolve some of the issues that are confronting society. They can play an active role in parent-teacher association in schools, trying to help improve schools and steer things right. They can become active politically and make sure that the right issues are pushed up the political agenda and are discussed by the population and the politicians. If they do those kinds of things, as well as bringing up their own children and encouraging friends of their children, then they are going to be making a contribution. If they withdraw into selfish corner as to, I'm okay, Jack, I'm comfortable, and the rest is not my problem, I leave it to government. I don't need to do anything. It's not going to work. So they can play an important role, but it depends on how they behave.
Bekele, you have millions of volunteers in Africa for the Red Cross. teaching young children HIV, AIDS information, first aid, and etc. Do you see that this emerging, growing middle class is among those volunteers? Do they care? Do they step up like Mr. Annan was hoping?
Well, yes, indeed. I mean, there are millions of volunteers across Africa, from the north to the south, from Cairo to South Africa, from Ethiopia to Senegal. There are over 3 million volunteers. The volunteers are not only the youth, the younger generation. The volunteers have all ages. They are educated people. They are service delivery, younger generation at service delivery, and elderly who participate in governance. We have, in Africa, we have established quite a good system whereby there is effective participation from the grassroots up to the nation's capital. There is a regular General Assembly. There is a limited term of office in governance. Management is accountable to governance, and systems are being put in place, etc. Now, this situation is changing attitudes and mindsets. In Africa today, when I travel around, I usually talk to the beneficiaries and the youngsters as well. The beneficiaries are no more the beneficiaries I have known 10 years ago, 15 years ago. They want support, yes, but they want support that can help them help themselves. The younger generation is really, they tell me, look, don't come to prolong agony for Africans. If you support us to support ourselves. Support us to become self-sufficient. So there is a tremendous lot of change in attitudes and mindsets among Africans. They want to engage, they want to participate, they want to shape their life. This is extremely important, the way I see it. Now, therefore, the younger generation, very dynamic, very committed, and they want to engage with all of us. And they challenge us in many respects. They want to participate, including in the leadership of the civil society, in the leadership of the Red Cross.
Thank you. Mrs. Hlahla, Mr. Kaberuka was also mentioning the importance of SMEs, the small and medium-sized businesses, and entrepreneurship as a prerequisite for inclusive growth and opportunities for people. Do Africa have a good policy for SMEs?
I think it's not so much about whether African countries have got the right policies. I think it's more about whether we approach our businesses with the view that Africa, societies, and households have been held by a class of informal sector people that are highly entrepreneurial, that are highly creative, that have been able to do so many different things, even outside of government oftentimes. And importantly for me, before I go on, Africa, yes, is largely young, but it is largely young and female. And the African woman has held Africa through wars, famine, and everything. And yet, when we deal with an environment as business is, where we want to grow consistently, deliberately, and at a high pace, so that it's predictable, we never look back to what created the consistency, the balance, the continuity in society, and it's been small entrepreneurs that are male and female, but I want to emphasize very much female. For me, going forward, business and FDI should look for these entrepreneurs to partner with. That is more sustainable. It brings their children, their communities along into the investment. participate either as providing services or as getting employment, but they are there. You can't continue to say people in Africa are uneducated when in fact a large percentage is all over the world working for all these multinational companies to show you that something worked. It is about going in and finding out what the African is about and leveraging them into the investments that we make. Lastly, if I may, for government, for all of the investments that we made, if we could imagine that from every 1 billion rand of investment or $1 billion of investment made, if we could look for the same opportunities as Masmat said, to see the extent to which a small farmer can supply into that investment, whether a program of education and training for the community where you are located as a business, if that isn't the approach for the new economy, where we say investment and growth alone are not enough. Let us leverage employment creation, partnerships with our entrepreneurs, growing from primary sectors to higher sectors, so that the African can build the base to grow itself into the future. It is about dignity. We all want the dignity to know we can also do it for ourselves.
Thank you. We're coming to a close, and Mr. Macmillan, listening to your colleagues on the co-chairs there on the panel, are you more optimistic on behalf of Africa? And will we see Walmart investing additional billions of US dollars in Africa in the coming years?
$2.4 billion was not enough.
It's a good start.
Yes. Time will tell. We're not in a hurry. We have a long-term view, and we want to learn the market, and we'll take it as it comes and try to get better every day. We'll see.
Are you optimistic on behalf of the continent?
For sure. No doubt. I think there are a lot of things to be optimistic about in the region, and there's nothing that I've heard today or while I've been here that's caused me to think otherwise.
Thank you. So, could you, and this is the last question, we'll go to Mr. Annan. Could this discussion have taken place 10 years ago?
10 years ago?
Yeah.
Not in this format. Not in this format. And I'm not sure the heads of states would have been here, nor would the people have spoken as frankly as they have. And to have it in Africa with the partnership with civil society, with business, with government, doing it. So I think we have made progress. But what I think is important is not only whether this could have taken place 10 years ago or not, but where we are and where we are going. And I think the energy in our societies, the energy of the young people, and as I indicated earlier, the return of educated African men and women, and the discovery of Africa's investment potential by countries and companies around the world offers a real potential for us. And I think if exploited properly, when we meet 10 years from now, you will be asking, what did Africa do to take advantage of the current climate to be where it should be or where it is 10 years from now? And we will have moved a lot in 10 years' time. So I would want to look back with you in 10 years and see where we are. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for your wisdom, Mr. Annan, and thank you to the panel. It's such a distinguished panel. It's been such a privilege to also moderate this panel. And I also would like to thank the excellencies on the first row here, prime ministers, presidents, listening in for 1 hour to what I hope you also found rewarding. A discussion focusing on the 600 million young people of Africa. It's their destiny that we're now deciding on when it comes to education, investments in health, also in inclusive growth, when it comes to releasing also the great opportunities in agriculture, infrastructure, and etc. So again, thank you so much to the panel. I think this has been a great start of a very important summit here in Addis Ababa. Thank you.